There's a reason why the stories of brave boys and unlikely heroes echo through generations. Beneath the dragons, beanstalks, and magic swords, fairy tales hide something deeper, an ancient map of the masculine soul. Marie-Louise von Franz, a devoted student of Jung, saw these tales not as children's entertainment, but as living myths, psychological blueprints. And in many of them, we see the boy, alone, misunderstood, sometimes foolish, but always called to something beyond the familiar, beyond the safe. This is the beginning of the journey, the slow unfolding of what Jung called the process of individuation, the becoming of oneself. In fairy tales, the masculine doesn't simply grow, it is tested, shattered, and reassembled. The path is rarely noble at first. Often, the hero is naive, lazy, or even dismissed by his own family. Think of the simpleton, the third son, the one no one expects anything from. But it is exactly this figure who dares to follow the strange voice, who climbs the impossible beanstalk, who walks into the forest while others stay behind. Why? Because deep down, the masculine spirit is not built in comfort. It is awakened through trials, through facing the unknown, through failure, through loss. The giant in the clouds, the riddles of the king, the dark wood, they are not just obstacles. They are reflections, mirrors of inner struggle. And slowly, step by step, something changes. Not just the world around the hero, but the hero himself. The impulsive boy begins to listen. The fearful one finds courage. The one who mocked love learns its weight. These are not external victories. They are inner shifts. The boy becomes a man not because he wins a crown, but because he meets himself, his strength, his wounds, and his purpose. Fairy tales are gentle in tone, but fierce in truth. They whisper to us, especially to men, your journey will not look like anyone else's, but it must begin. And if you follow it, it will transform you. And perhaps that's why these stories survive. Because somewhere inside, we all long to take that first step. There is a moment in every fairy tale when the hero is left alone. The house is behind him. The voices of his brothers fade. The comforts of childhood no longer shield him. And for the first time, he walks forward, not because someone told him to, but because something deep inside demands it. This moment marks the real beginning of his transformation. Marie-Louise von Franz recognized this as a symbolic shift from boyhood to manhood. Not a physical change, but a psychic one. A rupture. A break from dependency. The boy steps out of the known and into a space where he must become something more than what he was told to be. But what does it mean to become a man? Is it power? Achievement? Stoic silence? The fairy tales suggest something far more complex and far more human. The hero is not born strong. He is not ready. He is, more often than not, foolish, clumsy, or dismissed. But he carries one thing that sets him apart: a strange willingness to act, to walk, to risk. He listens to a dream, follows a golden bird, talks to a talking fox, and everyone around him thinks he's lost his mind. But isn't that how growth begins? With a choice no one else understands. The boy must step away from the collective, from the voice of the tribe, from the family's expectations, even from his own comfort. This is why, in so many tales, the hero is the youngest son, the overlooked one. Not because he is destined to win, but because he has nothing to lose. He can afford to break the mold. This is not a journey of arrogance. It is a journey of necessity. At some point, every man must walk through a gate that no one else can pass with him. And that gate often opens in silence, in suffering, or in solitude. But why must it be lonely? Because individuation, the true becoming of the self, cannot be borrowed. No one can live your path for you. No one can hand you your identity. It must be carved, painfully, from your own experience. The forest must be entered alone. The giant must be faced alone. And the treasure, if found, must be earned by the one who dared to keep walking. Yet, loneliness does not mean isolation. The solitude of the hero is not abandonment, it is initiation. A sacred space where the noise of the world fades and the voice within begins to rise. A voice that says, "You were made for more, but to find it, you must let go of what you were." And this is where the true trial begins. Not outside, but inside. The boy must face his own fear, his own laziness, his desire to turn back, to be rescued, to be seen as good without doing what is hard. But there is no going back. Not really. Because once the path is glimpsed, the soul cannot pretend it never saw it. So he walks, uncertain, often trembling, but alive. And in time, something shifts. The world does not change. The forest is still dark. The trials still come. But he is no longer the same. He does not wait for others to define him. He does not seek the crown from someone else's hand. He begins to shape himself, flawed, imperfect, but real. Isn't that the true measure of manhood? Not perfection, not dominance, but presence, will, and a heart that chose to become whole, even if it meant walking alone. Because in the end, the hero's solitude is not the absence of others. It is the presence of the self. And from that place, the boy becomes the man he was meant to be. At first glance, Jack and the Beanstalk seems like a reckless tale. A poor boy trades a cow for a handful of beans, climbs into the sky, steals from a giant, and somehow ends up rich and victorious. But as Marie-Louise von France teaches us, fairy tales speak in symbols. And beneath Jack's foolishness lies something far more powerful, the awakening of a deeper, unconscious courage. Jack is not brave in the usual sense. He doesn't set out to be a hero. He acts impulsively, even childishly. He disobeys his mother, ignores common sense, and trusts a stranger. But these actions, irrational on the surface, hint at a deeper process stirring within, a force that moves beneath thought. Jung would call it the unconscious self beginning to assert itself, not with logic, but with instinct. The beanstalk itself is no ordinary plant. It grows overnight, reaching from the earth to the heavens, a perfect symbol of psychic elevation, of the boy's inner world stretching upward towards something transcendent. Jack doesn't build the beanstalk, he receives it. This is how courage often arrives, not as something we invent, but as something that surprises us, even frightens us, yet beckons us forward. When Jack climbs, he ascends out of the ordinary world and into the domain of giants, those overwhelming forces that often rule a young man's psyche: fear, rage, authority, and greed. The giant is not just an external threat. He is a reflection of Jack's inner struggle with power, domination, and danger. And yet, Jack doesn't turn back. Why? Because the unconscious knows when it's time to grow. Jack steals from the giant, not out of cruelty, but to retrieve what was lost: gold, a harp, a hen that lays golden eggs. These are not just treasures. They are symbols of value, creativity, and potential. Elements of the self that were once taken or hidden by fear, trauma, or overpowering forces in the psyche. Jack's theft is a reclaiming, a return of what rightfully belongs to him. But this reclaiming is not safe. Jack must climb, steal, escape, and eventually confront the giant directly. He must cut down the beanstalk, cutting the connection between himself and the overpowering complex he has now overcome. What makes Jack's courage meaningful is that it was not planned. It rose from within. He followed something without fully understanding it. And this is often how the masculine soul awakens, not through certainty, but through the willingness to act even when the path is unclear. In the end, Jack and the Beanstalk is not about theft or luck. It is about transformation, about the boy who dared to go higher than others thought possible, about the man who emerges when unconscious courage is followed, when instinct and soul align. Because sometimes the first step to becoming yourself is climbing something no one else can see. There is something strangely quiet about The Golden Goose. Unlike tales of sword fights and dragons, this story unfolds with a soft irony. A simple boy, often mocked, underestimated, shows kindness to a stranger, receives a golden goose, and suddenly, people can't help but follow him. Not because he commands them, not because he tries, but precisely because he doesn't. Marie-Louise von France saw in stories like this a different kind of masculine strength, not the one that dominates or conquers, but the one that attracts without effort. A strength that comes not from power, but from inner alignment. The hero of this tale is not impressive. In fact, he's dismissed by everyone, his brothers, his parents, society. He is the fool, the simpleton, the one no one expects anything from. But again, fairy tales teach us to look beyond appearances. This kind of character is not weak. He is untouched by ambition. His heart is open, not calculating. And that is his secret. When he shares his food with a hungry old man in the forest, he does so without expecting a reward. It is this spontaneous act of kindness, this unforced goodness, that opens the path ahead. In return, he receives the golden goose, a magical bird, beautiful, rare, and deeply symbolic. The golden goose is not something you catch or chase. It is something you're given, something that appears when you stop trying to prove your worth. It represents the gift of the authentic self, the glow of inner value. And when the boy walks with it, something strange happens. People become stuck to him, literally. One by one, those who try to seize the goose for themselves become glued, not because of punishment, but because of desire. They want what he has, but they do not understand it. They reach for the symbol of value without having earned it within, and so they stick. This scene, though humorous, holds a quiet truth. You cannot force your way to wholeness. You cannot grab meaning, love, or identity like possessions. When the masculine tries to perform, dominate, or impress, it only entangles itself in masks. But when it walks lightly, when it honors its own pace, its own truth, something shifts. The boy in the story never tells anyone to follow. He simply continues, calm, unconcerned. And eventually, his path leads him to the princess, who had never laughed before. But upon seeing this long train of foolish people stuck together, she bursts into joy. And something opens, not just for her, but for him too. In Jungian terms, this laughter is the breakthrough of the repressed soul. It is the moment when life, joy, and play return to the hardened places of the psyche. It is the moment when the union between the masculine and the feminine becomes possible, not through striving, but through authenticity. The Golden Goose tells us something radical. The most valuable parts of life cannot be earned by effort. They arrive through inner sincerity, through a kind heart, through the courage to be simple in a world obsessed with control. And perhaps this is the paradox at the heart of the masculine journey, that only when a man stops forcing the world to see his worth, the world begins to follow. Every fairy tale hero must face trials, not once, but again and again. These trials often appear as monsters, riddles, tyrant kings, or dark forests. But as Marie-Louise von France reveals, they are never just about the outside world. They are mirrors, reflections of the battles happening deep within the soul. One of the most powerful figures in this inner landscape is the father. Not the literal father, necessarily, but the inner father, the voice of authority, expectation, judgment. The part of us that says, be strong, be perfect, don't fail. This inner father can be noble, but more often in the stories of individuation, he is shown as a king who refuses to listen, a giant who devours, a figure who blocks the way. Why? Because before a man can become whole, he must separate from the version of himself that was shaped only to please, to perform, to obey. He must break free from the image of masculinity that was handed down to him, one that often demands power without vulnerability, achievement without emotion, strength without softness. And this is never easy. So the trials begin. The hero must face challenges that seem impossible. Fetch water from a well guarded by a beast, answer riddles, or be executed. Slay a dragon to win the hand of a silent princess. On the surface, these are just tests, but symbolically, they are initiations. Each one strips away an illusion. Each one forces the hero to dig deeper, to find a strength that does not come from pride, but from presence. In these moments, the world around him appears hostile. People betray him. The king mocks him. Even his brothers turn away, and he is left alone. But here lies the paradox. The hostility of the world is the very pressure that shapes the soul. Without resistance, there is no growth. Without being tested, the hero would remain asleep, tied to safety, still echoing the voice of the father instead of hearing his own. One of the most telling symbols in many tales is the failed brother, the one who tries to complete the trial using logic, strength, or pride. He always fails, because these stories are not about external victory. They are about inner transformation. The true hero does not conquer the world by force. He listens to the animals. He is kind to strangers. He asks for help. He trusts the invisible. And by doing so, he learns to relate, not dominate. He learns humility. He learns receptivity. He begins to feel. The trials break him open, and through them, something radical begins to happen. The tyrant king softens. The father who was distant now offers a crown. The world that once mocked him now kneels. But this is not about approval. The outer father changes because the inner father has been transformed. He is no longer feared. He is integrated. The boy no longer needs to prove himself. He has become his own authority. Fairy tales remind us, the path is hard not because life is cruel, but because transformation requires pressure. The fire that tempers the sword is the same fire that awakens the self. And so the trials continue, not to punish, but to purify, to prepare the hero for what comes next. Because only the one who has walked through fear, betrayal, and failure can carry the treasure without becoming a tyrant himself. In so many fairy tales, a princess waits at the end of the hero's journey, beautiful, silent, distant, offered as a prize to the one who slays the dragon or solves the riddle. At first glance, this seems simple. Do the task, win the girl. But from a Jungian lens, and through the insights of Marie-Louise von France, this image carries a far deeper meaning. The feminine in these tales is not just a reward. She is a symbol, a presence, and more importantly, a force. She is the soul. In Jungian psychology, this inner feminine is called the anima. She represents emotion, intuition, depth, relatedness, the very qualities that many cultures have taught boys to ignore. And yet, she waits. Not passively, but purposefully. She waits for the hero to become ready. Not for her body, but for her presence. Not to own her, but to meet her. And that makes all the difference. Because if the hero sees the feminine only as a reward, he remains trapped in ego. He believes that doing earns love, that conquering earns connection, that masculinity must prove itself through possession. But fairy tales quietly challenge this. The true feminine does not surrender to force. She awakens only when the masculine is transformed, when it has become humble, open, receptive. In many tales, the hero must spend time with the feminine before any task begins. He meets a wise old woman, a fairy, or a mysterious maiden in the forest. These figures offer guidance, insight, or magical help, but only if he treats them with respect, not arrogance. This is key. The feminine, in its symbolic form, tests the hero too, not through combat, but through presence. Can he listen? Can he feel? Can he see beyond the surface? Often, it is the advice of a neglected old woman that leads to victory, not the sword. Often, it is compassion, not strength, that opens the locked door. And when the hero finally reaches the princess, not as a prize, but as a partner, something else happens. Union. In psychological terms, this is the marriage between the masculine and the feminine within the psyche. The moment when instinct meets reflection, when action meets meaning, when the outer quest begins to mirror the inner longing. The anima is not there to complete the hero. She is there to reveal him, to reflect back the parts of himself he buried to survive. The tenderness, the grief, the longing to be held, not just admired. Von Franz understood this deeply. She saw how the loss of the feminine soul leads to a hardened masculinity, driven, anxious, disconnected. And she saw how the integration of the feminine brings softness, balance, and depth. So, is the feminine a reward? Only to the ego. To the soul, she is a mirror, a guide, an ally. She appears when the hero no longer seeks to win, but to relate. Not to possess, but to understand. And in that moment, the journey shifts. No longer about proving worth, now about becoming whole. The journey of the masculine soul in fairy tales is not a simple path. It moves from instinct, raw, untamed, often impulsive, to consciousness, where choice, awareness, and integration begin to take root. Marie-Louise von Franz, building on Jung's vision, showed us that this journey is at the heart of what it means to become a man in the deepest sense. At the beginning, the hero acts out of instinct. He is driven by hunger, fear, desire, or impulse. Like Jack climbing the beanstalk, he does not fully understand where his courage comes from. It arises suddenly, almost mysteriously. This instinct is essential. It is the energy of life itself, the force that propels the soul to leave safety and confront the unknown. But instinct alone is not enough. Without consciousness, it can lead to recklessness, destruction, or stagnation. The boy who follows every impulse remains lost in chaos. The man who never awakens from this instinctual slumber remains a child in disguise. Individuation is the process of waking up. It is learning to recognize those unconscious drives, not to suppress them, but to bring them into the light of awareness. This is no easy task. It requires courage to face what we have hidden, our fears, our shadow, the parts of ourselves society has told us to reject. The trials in fairy tales symbolize this process. The hero's battles with giants, riddles, and darkness are not just external adventures. They are inner confrontations. Each challenge pushes the hero to see deeper, to reflect, to choose consciously, rather than react blindly. As the hero grows in awareness, he learns balance. Strength is tempered by humility. Courage is paired with wisdom. Action becomes intentional, not impulsive. And with consciousness comes integration, the weaving together of the fragmented self. The masculine learns to accept its own complexity, including vulnerability, emotion, and connection. The anima, the inner feminine, no longer feels foreign or threatening, but becomes a guide and partner in the journey. This integration leads to wholeness. The hero no longer needs to prove himself through endless battles. He moves through the world with presence and authenticity. He carries both the fire of instinct and the light of consciousness. Marie-Louise von Franz reminds us that this process is lifelong. Individuation is not a destination, but a path, a continuous unfolding. It asks the masculine to evolve beyond simple survival and power toward true self-realization. And in this journey, from instinct to consciousness, lies the true heart of the masculine soul. If this exploration of reason why the stories of brave boys and unlikely heroes touch something deep within you, don't keep it to yourself. Share your thoughts and personal reflections in the comments below. Your story matters here. Subscribe and join our community to uncover more hidden wisdom from myths and psychology. Together, we'll walk the path from suffering to wisdom, one story at a time.